Welcome to part 3 of our videos on how to do well on map quizzes. In our introduction we talked about studying smarter, not harder, making sure your practice is like your performance, and then using habits of the brains. We've talked about making sure your map is filled out properly and in time. We've talked about how to memorize them and get them into your head. Now we're going to talk about practicing at home. It's part of the memorizing process that you do at home when you're studying. Let's look first at a typical map quiz. So here's the map quiz we've been looking at of political Africa. Off to the side we have our little answer sheet. On quiz day you'd get this as a separate piece of paper. It's got 1 through 20 blanks on it. I only have room for 9 here. And now we're going to figure out how do we practice. Well, you need to at home practice just like you would at school. So use your map here that you've put the little stars on. And I have these mal from before. If I were to erase them now or not have put them on in the first place, what I would do is number them, randomly. This is number 2, 1, 3, 6, 5, 7. Just number the ones that you're supposed to learn. You've just made yourself a map quiz, basically. Then grab a piece of notebook paper, and you have your answer sheet off to the side then. So you've got your map with numbers on it, an answer sheet off to the side. Now let's practice. Now here's where most kids get off track right from the beginning. They get their answer sheet on quiz day and they immediately fill in number 1. That's the mistake. That would be Algeria. Why would you fill that in number 1 though? That is not the first one you learned. Make sure your brain follows the same pattern you've been practicing. No matter what I've called this one, whether it's number 2, 4, 20, 13, whatever, this should always be the first one you write down because that's the first one you learned. So if I use a different color, this was Morocco, I would immediately on quiz day go to number 9 and say, okay, that's Morocco. Well, I need to do that at home too. I look at it, okay, that's number 9, I put it on my 9th blank, Morocco. I write it down. Remember, physical things helps you remember. So physically writing the word again helps me remember. Go in that pattern. So now the next one is number 1. So that's Algeria. Number 13 is off the list, but I would fill that in and go from there. Let's say number 2 here is Nigeria. I wrote it down, and for some reason I spelled it with an A. Now, spelling is part of the map quiz. You need to make sure you're spelling these things right. If you had never written this down during practice time, you would never know whether you spelled it correctly. So now that I've written it down, I can compare it to my map with the answers on it, which is right here. I'd find Nigeria and say, oh, shoot, it's an A, not an I. So I go back here and I say, I spelled it wrong. I fix it, okay, there's an I. And the next time through, I make sure I spell it right. You've got to be writing them down, just like you will on the quiz. How often is it on a quiz where you're used to saying them really quickly at home, but then when you get to a quiz, you have to go much slower because you're writing it, and you lose track of where you are and you freeze. So when you're at home practicing, write it down. Go in the same pattern, left to right, top to bottom, and check your spelling. Now move on to video number 4, how to actually take the quiz.